she said. Why can't you be more like Jessica's husband? He just bought her a BMW. I replied, good point. Then I matched his energy by asking for a prenup like he did. Her attitude changed instantly when the attorney explained what that meant. It wasn't a new conversation, but tonight it felt different. Sarah had been dropping hints for weeks. At first, I thought it was harmless, just playful comparisons. But as we sat in her friend's living room, I started to feel the weight of her words more than I ever had before. We were at Jessica's place, a dinner party with friends. The kind of gathering where you pretend to enjoy small talk, but are really just scanning the room for an escape. I'd never been fond of these get-togethers, but it was important to Sarah, so I made the effort. The atmosphere was warm, everyone laughing over some in-joke, the smell of garlic and rosemary drifting from the kitchen. Jessica's husband, Brad, had just shown off their new BMW. The car was sleek, black and shiny, every inch of it radiating success. He mentioned it was a surprise gift for Jessica, and that her reaction had been priceless. Sarah's eyes had lit up when she saw the car. She spent the next hour fawning over it, sitting in the driver's seat, taking pictures with her phone, even bragging about it to anyone who'd listen. I kept my head down, nursing my drink and pretending I wasn't noticing, but she was clearly enchanted. As we drove home that evening, the silence in the car felt heavier than it ever had before. She stared out the window, her lips tight, her face set in a quiet pout. Then, without warning, she turned to me and said, "Why can't you be more like Jessica's husband? He just bought her a BMW just because he loves her." I tried to let it slide. I was tired, exhausted from the long day, and I didn't want to fight. But I could feel the irritation building in my chest. The comparison, it stung. I didn't respond at first. She continued, her voice almost pleading. "Other men can do both. You're always talking about saving for our future, but Jessica's husband is doing it all. He manages both his career and giving her the things she deserves." Her words echoed in my mind, and I realized she didn't just want the BMW. It wasn't about the car, it was about a lifestyle. The lifestyle that, she believed, I wasn't providing. She didn't say it outright, but I could hear it in the way she said, properly, like there was an unspoken test I was failing. I kept driving, my fingers gripping the steering wheel, my gaze fixed on the road ahead. We didn't talk for the rest of the night. It wasn't until the next morning, when I woke up to her cold silence, that I realized just how deep the frustration had taken root. Over the next week, it only got worse. Sarah would casually drop more comments about Jessica's husband, her perfect trips and designer bags. She'd remind me how she deserved the same. I kept quiet. I didn't want to fight before the wedding, didn't want to cause unnecessary drama, but it was eating at me. The comparison wasn't just about material things anymore. It was about something deeper, something I wasn't sure I was prepared to confront. Her constant references to him, to his success, his generosity. It felt like a judgment. Like I wasn't good enough. One Saturday, we were sitting at a cafe, having coffee with another couple. As usual, the conversation drifted to the topic of prenups. The guy casually mentioned his own prenup, explaining how it was a smart financial decision. Sarah laughed, dismissing it as unromantic and a deal-breaker for her. Later that night, after we got home, she went off about it. "Can you imagine making your wife sign paperwork like she's a business deal?" She was laughing, but there was something sharp in her tone. That's when it clicked. Something inside me snapped. I wasn't going to let this continue. If she could compare me to a man who had a prenup, then I'd do the same. I texted Jessica's husband, asking if he had a prenup. It felt ridiculous, but I was curious. His response was almost instant. "Yeah, solid one too. Financial advisor insisted before I bought the ring." Why, just curious. I thought about it for a second, then typed out the message. "My fiancé keeps comparing me to you. Thought I'd match your energy." He replied quickly, "Lol. Good luck with that conversation." And just like that, I knew what I had to do. The next morning, as Sarah started on her usual routine of comparing me to Brad, I stopped her. "Actually, if we're doing things like that," I said, "I should probably be more like him in all ways." Her eyes widened, a smile starting to form. "What do you mean?" she asked, clearly thrilled to hear me finally come around. "Well," I said, clearly thought about financial planning, about protecting his assets, about being smart. Her smile was wide now, but I wasn't done. "So, I think I'll take his lead, just like he did." She leaned in, expecting to hear me finally admit that I'd change. That's when I said it. I'm going to start with a prenuptial agreement. Her smile vanished. She recoiled as if I had slapped her. What? She whispered, her voice barely audible. Prenup, like him? I nodded slowly, letting the weight of the words sink in. She stood up, her anger mounting, trembling with rage. You've got to be kidding me. After 4 years, this is what you think of me. I didn't flinch. No, it's not about trust. It's about being smart. It's about protecting both of us, like Brad did. She stormed out, slamming the door behind her, leaving me to wonder just how far this would go. The days that followed the conversation about the prenup were some of the most uncomfortable of my life. Sarah's cold silence hung in the air, thick and suffocating. She barely spoke to me, and when she did, her words felt clipped, like she was trying to distance herself from me. I could feel the tension between us like a wall I couldn't break through. I knew she was upset. Hell, I was upset too. But what had I done wrong? I had tried to match her expectations. She wanted me to be more like her friend's husband, someone who bought her a luxury car without a second thought. So, I did what I thought was right. I protected myself just like he had. It wasn't about trust, but she didn't see it that way. For the next few days, she stewed in her anger, and I let it simmer. I didn't chase after her, didn't apologize. I just let it be. I was holding my ground. But every time I walked into the living room, I could feel her eyes on me, sharp and accusing, like I was the villain in a story I didn't understand. By the time the weekend rolled around, we hadn't talked about the prenup again, but I could feel it hanging over us, like an unspoken rule between us. She'd bring up things about Jessica's husband here and there, how he surprised Jessica with weekend trips, how he bought her expensive gifts, how everything seemed so easy for him. Each comment made my jaw tighten, but I kept quiet, just trying to keep things peaceful. But I wasn't at peace. The comparisons were eating at me. They were eroding the foundation of what I thought we had. A relationship based on mutual respect, shared goals, and understanding. Instead, it felt like I was being reduced to a financial resource, a means to an end. On Sunday, we were having coffee at a local cafe, trying to act normal. The weather was perfect, bright, sunny, the kind of day that made everything feel like it should be okay. But of course, it wasn't. It never was when it came to us lately. As we sat there, another couple walked by and stopped to chat. It was the usual small talk. How's the wedding planning? How's work? At some point, the guy mentioned his prenup casually, almost offhand, like it was just part of the deal. Smart move, I thought, even as Sarah laughed it off. Who even does that anymore? She said, tossing the idea aside. A prenup. So unromantic. I could feel the tension growing again, a familiar stir in my chest. It wasn't just the idea of a prenup that bothered her. It was what it represented. Security. Protection. The very things I thought were important for our future together. She went on, still laughing, still dismissing it, but I couldn't take it anymore. Can you imagine making your wife sign paperwork like she's a business deal? She said. It hit me then. It wasn't just about the money. It was about how she saw me. How she saw us. I wasn't enough on my own. I had to live up to some ideal that wasn't even real. I had to be perfect for her. Perfect for her family, perfect for her friends. She was asking me to be someone I wasn't, someone I couldn't be. Yeah, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I can imagine. It wasn't what I wanted to say, but it was the truth. So, I texted her friend's husband that night. I didn't want to, but I had to know. Hey man, I typed, random question, do you have a prenup? It felt strange, but the response came almost immediately. Yeah, solid one too. Financial advisor insisted before I bought the ring. Why? I stared at his words, letting them settle in my mind. I wasn't crazy. This was normal, smart even. Not paranoid, just smart. I didn't even need to think about it after that. I knew what I had to do. If Sarah was going to keep comparing me to a man who protected himself, who planned for the future, then I had to do the same. The next day we were back at home, sitting across from each other on the couch. Her eyes were tired, probably from all the emotional strain. I didn't know what to expect when I brought it up again. But I knew I couldn't keep pretending this wasn't an issue. Not anymore. I looked at her, taking a deep breath before I spoke. Actually, if we're doing things like that, I began, my voice surprisingly steady, I should probably be more like him in all ways. She sat up, her eyes brightening as she leaned in. What do you mean? she asked, hopeful. I smiled a little, though it didn't reach my eyes. Well, he clearly thought about financial planning, about protecting his assets. I should do the same. I could see her smile fade just a little, but I wasn't done. I'm going to start with a prenuptial agreement. For a moment, everything stopped. Her face went pale, her eyes wide with shock. What? She whispered. A prenup? Like him? Yeah, I replied, holding her gaze.
Like him?
You said I should be more like him.
Right.
So I'm taking your advice. She stood up, her hands trembling. This is ridiculous, she snapped, pacing the room. After 4 years, this is what you think of me. You don't trust me. I shook my head. It's not about trust, it's about protecting both of us. You wanted me to be like him. Well, here's the thing, he protected himself. I need to do the same. Her anger flared. That's cold, she said, her voice shaking. That's calculating. You're treating me like I'm some business deal. Not at all, I replied, my voice calm but firm. I'm just being smart. I'm protecting us both. She turned and stormed out, slamming the door behind her. I stood there, heart pounding, wondering if I just made the biggest mistake of my life, or the smartest decision. The next few days after Sarah stormed out were a blur. I could feel the tension in the air, thick and suffocating. She didn't reach out. Neither did I. We were both stewing in our own emotions, each of us holding onto our pride. I kept thinking about the conversation, replaying every moment in my head. Did I overreact? Had I pushed her too far? Or had I just done what I needed to do? The silence between us felt heavier than any argument we'd ever had. It was a constant reminder of the unspoken words between us, a silent war we were fighting in our own minds. I knew she was angry, but I didn't know how much. Was she angry because I asked for a prenup, or was it because I hadn't caved to her expectations? I kept busy with work, throwing myself into spreadsheets and meetings to avoid thinking about the mess we were in. But whenever I came home, there was always that nagging feeling like I was walking into a battlefield every time I opened the door. The house was quiet, too quiet. We barely spoke. By Friday, I couldn't stand it anymore. I had to know where we stood. I texted Sarah, asking if we could talk. She didn't respond right away, and for a moment, I wondered if I was being foolish, thinking we could still work things out. But then, about an hour later, I got a message from her. We need to talk. My heart sank. I had no idea what to expect. I felt like I was walking into a storm. I waited for her to arrive, pacing back and forth in the living room. The whole house felt different now, like it was no longer home. When she finally walked in, she didn't look at me. She just walked past me, her eyes avoiding mine. She was holding a bag of takeout, trying to act casual. But I could see it in her face. She was nervous. She set the bag down on the kitchen counter, then turned to face me. I think we need to discuss the prenup, she said quietly, but there was a tightness in her voice that I could hear. I nodded, my stomach twisting in knots. This was it, the moment I'd been dreading. Was she going to apologize? Was she going to double down on her anger? I didn't know, but I was ready for whatever came next. I'm not happy about it, she began. You know that? I nodded again. I know, but I had to do it, Sarah. You kept comparing me to Brad, and I wasn't comparing you to Brad, she interrupted, her voice rising slightly. I was just telling you what I wanted, what I needed. You wanted things, I said. But you weren't willing to look at the reality of how those things are paid for. Brad didn't just get that BMW handed to him. He made smart decisions about his finances, just like I'm trying to do now. She didn't say anything for a long moment. I could see the conflict in her eyes. She wanted to argue, to tell me I was wrong, but there was a hesitation in her gaze that made me think maybe she was starting to understand. Or maybe she was just tired of fighting. I just don't understand why you're being so cold about this, she finally said, her voice softer now. We've been together for 4 years. Why can't we just be normal? Why does everything have to be about money? Because it's not just about money, Sarah, I said, my voice steady but firm. It's about trust, it's about protecting both of us. If something happens to me, I want to make sure you're taken care of. And if something happens to us, I want to make sure we don't lose everything we've built. She looked at me, her eyes searching my face, trying to find something that wasn't there. I could see her trying to find a way out of this, a way to make everything go back to how it was. But it couldn't, not now. I don't want you to think this is about not trusting you, I continued, my voice softening. I'm just being realistic. I want us to have a future together, but I also need to make sure that I'm protecting what I've worked for." She sat down on the couch, her hands in her lap, looking down at the floor. For a moment we both just sat there silent. I wanted to reach out to tell her it was going to be okay, but I couldn't. Not yet. Finally she spoke again. "So what happens now? Are we just going to keep fighting over this?" I shook my head, but I can't back down. "If you're not willing to sign the prenup, then we need to reconsider where this relationship is going." Her eyes flashed with anger again, but there was a tinge of sadness there too, like she knew I wasn't going to budge. "You're serious about this, aren't you?" she said, almost in disbelief. "I am," I replied quietly. "I have to be." She stood up abruptly, the sudden movement startling me. "I don't know if I can do this, Robin," she said, her voice breaking. "I don't know if I can marry someone who doesn't trust me." I stood up as well, my heart pounding in my chest. "It's not about trust. It's about being smart, about planning for the future. I need to know that we're on the same page." She didn't respond. She just grabbed her coat and walked out, leaving me standing there in the silence, unsure of what was going to happen next. The next few days passed in a blur. She didn't contact me and I didn't reach out either. I was waiting for her to come back, waiting for her to see things my way. But deep down, I knew we were at a crossroads. Either she would accept the prenup, and we'd find a way to move forward, or she wouldn't. And we'd have to face the reality that we were fundamentally different in what we wanted from this relationship. I was starting to realize that the prenup wasn't just a legal document, it was a symbol. A symbol of everything we hadn't been able to say, of everything had been left unsaid between us. And as much as I didn't want to face it, I knew it was the thing that would either break us or make us stronger. I just didn't know which one it would be yet. The days after Sarah walked out were an emotional haze. I couldn't focus on anything. Work felt meaningless. My apartment, once a sanctuary, now felt like a prison. I kept replaying her words in my mind, her anger, her shock. "You don't trust me." It was a sentence that rang in my ears over and over, but it wasn't about trust. It was about security, about protecting what I had worked for, what we could build together. If we were both on the same page, I knew she was hurting. But I wasn't sure if it was because I had asked for a prenup, or because she realized that we weren't as aligned as we thought. Maybe, deep down, she knew I wasn't willing to just give her what she wanted without making sure I was protected. It wasn't about the money, it was about the principle of the matter. I couldn't ignore the fact that I had worked hard for everything I had. My assets, my condo, my retirement funds, they were mine before we met, and they meant something to me. But every time I tried to process it, I kept thinking back to the way she had reacted. She wasn't angry because I was protecting myself. She was angry because I wasn't playing the role she wanted me to play. The role of the man who could just keep buying things, who could keep up with the image she had in her head. I spent the next few days in a haze. I wasn't sure what was going to happen. Would she come back? Would we be able to salvage this? A part of me wanted to fix things, to go back to how we were. But deep down, I knew I couldn't ignore the elephant in the room. Our values were different. She wanted a life of luxury without any responsibility, while I wanted a life where both of us took ownership of our choices, where we made decisions together, financial decisions, life decisions. It was on Thursday when the phone call came. I had just gotten home from work, feeling drained. I wasn't expecting it. I wasn't sure what to expect at all. But when I saw her name on my phone, my heart skipped a beat. My mind raced as I pressed the green button. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice soft, almost hesitant. I didn't know what to say. "About what?" I asked, my throat tight. "The prenup," she said, and I could hear the tension in her voice. "I've been thinking about it. A lot." My chest tightened. This was the moment I had been dreading. I had no idea what she was going to say, but I was prepared to stand my ground. "I think we need to sit down and go over it," she continued. "I want to understand where you're coming from, but I also want to make sure we're on the same page." There it was, the opening I had been waiting for. "Okay," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Tonight," she said. "I'll come by after dinner." I wasn't sure if I was relieved or anxious. Part of me didn't want to deal with it anymore. I wanted to move on, to let things go back to normal. but the other part of me knew this conversation had to happen. It was either we were going to be able to move past this or we wouldn't. That evening, as I waited for her to arrive, I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. I hadn't seen her since that day she walked out, and now she was coming back, but for how long? Was this just a conversation, or was this the beginning of the end? When she arrived, she looked different. There was no anger in her eyes this time, but there was something else, something that made her look small, unsure. She wasn't the confident, self-assured woman I had always known. Instead, she seemed like she was carrying something heavy, like she wasn't sure how to navigate this. She set her bag down and sat on the couch, avoiding my gaze. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. It was like we were both waiting for the other to make the first move, to break the silence. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't want to lose you over this," she said. "But I don't know how to move forward if everything is going to be about money." I stared at her, trying to process her words. I wanted to tell her it wasn't about the money. I wanted to tell her that I didn't want to lose her, either, but it was hard, knowing how different our views were. "Sarah," I said, my voice shaky, "this isn't about the money. It's about making sure that, no matter what happens, we're both protected. If we're going to build a life together, we need to make sure that we're both secure. That's what this is about." She shook her head, her eyes welling up with tears. "But it feels like you're treating me like I'm just a financial risk. Like I'm some kind of liability." "That's not what this is, Sarah," I said, my voice breaking. "I love you. But I can't ignore the reality of things. We need to make sure that we're protecting ourselves, not just emotionally but financially." There was a long silence. I could see her trying to process everything I was saying. But I could tell she was struggling. I wasn't sure if she was hearing me, or if she was just hearing everything she didn't want to hear. "I've been thinking about it, Robin," she said finally, her voice small. "Maybe I was wrong to push you so hard. Maybe I've been focusing on the wrong things." I felt a flicker of hope. Was she finally seeing things from my perspective? "I'm willing to compromise," she continued. "Maybe I don't understand everything about what you're asking, but I'm willing to listen. We can talk about it, really talk about it." I looked at her, unsure of what to say. For the first time in days, it felt like we were on the same page. Maybe we could fix this. Maybe we could find a way forward. But even as I allowed myself to believe that, a part of me still knew we were at a crossroads. This wasn't just about a prenup anymore. It was about trust, about whether we could truly meet each other halfway. Whether we could truly understand each other. "I'm glad you're willing to listen," I said, my voice soft, "but I need you to understand, this is important. This is about our future. And I need to know we're both on the same page." She nodded, her eyes filled with uncertainty. "I want that too," she whispered. But I couldn't shake the feeling that things had already changed. The silence that followed our conversation hung between us, thick and uncomfortable. I wasn't sure where we stood anymore. She had agreed to listen, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we were just going through the motions, pretending everything would magically go back to normal. The days dragged on. Sarah didn't reach out much after that night, and I didn't know how to bridge the gap. It felt like we were both waiting for something, some sign that things were going to be okay, that we could find common ground. But the silence only deepened, and I could feel the emotional distance between us widening. One evening I was sitting at my desk, working late into the night. The soft hum of the city outside my window was a constant reminder that life was moving on whether I was ready or not. Then my phone buzzed. It was a message from Sarah. "I need to talk," it said. My heart skipped a beat. I stared at the screen for a moment, unsure how to respond. I didn't want to chase her. I didn't want to keep begging for her to come back. But I also didn't want to lose her. What if this was the moment that decided everything? I took a deep breath and typed back, "When?" She replied quickly, "I'll come by in an hour." I wasn't sure what to expect. Was she finally going to apologize? Was she finally going to understand? Or was this just another round of the same old arguments? I couldn't tell, and that uncertainty gnawed at me as I sat on the couch, waiting. When she arrived, her face was unreadable. She didn't come in with her usual enthusiasm, but neither did she seem angry. She just seemed tired. She walked in quietly, not meeting my gaze, and set her purse down on the table before sitting across from me. I've been thinking, she started, her voice soft. About the prenup. About everything. I felt my stomach tighten. I wasn't sure if this was going to be a breakthrough or if it was just more of the same. What about it? I asked, keeping my voice steady. She hesitated, her fingers nervously playing with the strap of her purse. I don't know if I was right, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. But I don't want to lose you over this. I was wrong to make you feel like you weren't enough. I froze. Those words hit me harder than I expected. I had been preparing myself for more anger, more defensiveness, but this was different. She was admitting she was wrong. I took a deep breath. I don't want to lose you either, Sarah. But I can't pretend like this doesn't matter. I can't just ignore it. We need to be able to protect ourselves, protect our future. She looked up at me, her eyes filled with uncertainty. I know now, it's just, I never thought of it like that. I thought a prenup meant you didn't trust me, but I get it now. I get that you just want to make sure we're both secure. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the one where we could finally have an honest conversation about our future. Exactly. It's not about not trusting you, Sarah. It's about making sure we're both protected, no matter what happens. She nodded slowly, her eyes downcast. I've been so focused on wanting more, on wanting things that I thought would make me happy. I didn't see that this was about us, about making sure we both have a future. I'm sorry. The apology hit me hard, but it also made something inside me shift. I had spent so much time trying to protect myself that I hadn't realized how much pain I had caused her. I had pushed her away with my insistence on the prenup, but she had pushed me away with her expectations. We were both guilty of something. I'm sorry too, I said, my voice thick. I should have been more open about why this was so important to me. She looked up at me then, a small smile starting to form on her lips. We can figure this out, Robin. We can get through this. But even as she said it, I felt a twinge of doubt. Could we really get through this? Could we rebuild the trust we had lost? Or had this conversation just scratched the surface of something deeper that we hadn't yet faced? The silence that followed felt different than the one before. It wasn't tense or uncomfortable. It was filled with something more hopeful, something tentative. But I wasn't sure if hope was enough to fix what had been broken. I think we need to take it slow, I said, breaking the silence. We need to make sure we're both on the same page about everything, not just the prenup, but everything. She nodded, her eyes softening. I agree. It was a small step, but it was a step. And for the first time in days, I felt like maybe, just maybe, there was still a way forward. But the question that lingered in my mind was whether we could truly rebuild what we had, or if we were just patching up the cracks that were too deep to fix. As she stood to leave, she turned back to me, her voice quiet. I don't know what's going to happen, Robin, but I want to try. I nodded. I do too. And with that, she left, leaving me to wonder if we had just begun to repair something that might never be the same again, or if we were only delaying the inevitable. The days following our conversation were a strange mix of silence and tentative hope. Sarah and I had agreed to talk things through, to try to understand each other better. But as much as we said we were going to work on things, nothing felt resolved. Every time we were together, it felt like there was something between us, something I couldn't quite reach. It wasn't just the prenup anymore. I had started to wonder if we were just patching cracks that had been there all along. I couldn't shake the feeling that maybe our issues went deeper than financial planning. Maybe we had different views on what we wanted out of life, out of a relationship. Maybe we were too different to really make it work. One night, as I sat on the couch, the phone buzzed. It was a text from Sarah. Can we talk? My stomach dropped. I knew what it was about, the prenup. I wasn't ready for this conversation again. I didn't want to go over it all. But part of me knew I had to. We had to come to some kind or make a decision about where this was going. I texted back, sure, when? She replied, I'm coming by in an hour. I wasn't sure what to expect. Would this be another round of anger, or was she ready to truly listen this time? My hands felt clammy as I waited for her to arrive. It felt like we were standing on the edge of something. I didn't know if it was the end or if we could still save this. When she arrived, she seemed different. There was no anger in her eyes this time, no defensiveness. But there was something else, something I couldn't quite place. She seemed nervous, unsure of how to approach this conversation, as if she was afraid of saying the wrong thing. She sat down beside me, a little farther than usual, and we both stared at the floor for a moment. Neither of us knew where to start. Finally, she spoke, her voice quiet. "I've been thinking," she said, "about the prenup, about everything." I nodded, bracing myself. "What about it?" She hesitated. I don't know if I was right to react the way I did. I didn't understand at the time, but now, I'm starting to see it differently. I didn't know what to say. I wanted to believe she had finally seen things from my side, but I wasn't sure yet. "How differently?" I asked, my voice cautious. "I think I was wrong," she said, her eyes meeting mine. "I thought it was about trust, but I realize now it's not. You just want to protect us. You want to make sure we're both secure, and that's something I should have understood." I took a deep breath. Hearing her say that felt like a weight lifting off my chest. For the first time in days, I felt like we might actually be on the same page. But I couldn't shake the nagging doubt that still lingered. Was this just an apology because she was scared of losing me, or was this real? "I'm glad you understand," I said softly, my voice tight. "But it's not just about security, Sarah. It's about being partners. It's about making sure that we both have control over our futures, no matter what happens." She nodded, her lips pressed together. "I get that now, and I'm sorry. I let my fears get in the way of understanding that." The words were what I needed to hear, but I still wasn't sure if I fully believed them. Could I trust that this shift in her perspective was real? Or was it just a temporary reaction to the tension we'd been living in? We sat in silence for a while, both of us processing what had been said. Then, slowly, she turned to me. "So, what now?" she asked, her voice small. I thought about it for a moment, then answered, "I think we need to take things slow. We need to figure out if we can truly move forward together, if we're really on the same page. The prenup isn't just a piece of paper, Sarah. It's about us learning to trust each other and be honest with each other. If we can't do that, then I don't know how we'll make this work." She nodded again, her eyes distant. "I don't want to lose you, Robin. I don't want to let this one thing ruin everything we've built." Her words hit me harder than I expected. I hadn't realized how much I needed to hear that from her. But I still couldn't ignore the uncertainty that lingered. How could we rebuild trust when it had been chipped away by our own insecurities? "I don't want to lose you either," I said, my voice steady but my heart racing. "But we have to be honest with ourselves, and we have to be honest with each other. No more pretending, no more hiding." She reached out, her hand resting on mine. It was a small gesture, but in that moment it felt like everything. "I'm willing to try," she said, her voice softer now. "I know we have a lot to figure out, but I'm willing to try. We don't have to have all the answers right now." I squeezed her hand, a sense of calm settling over me. It wasn't the perfect solution. We still had a lot to work through, but at least it felt like we were moving in the right direction. But even as I let myself believe that things might get better, a part of me still felt uneasy. We were still walking on a thin line, unsure of which way we'd fall. And for the first time, I wondered if it was even possible to go back to what we had. Would we find our way back to each other, or were we already too far gone? We didn't say much more after that. We both just sat in the quiet, unsure of where the future would take us. But for the first time in days, I felt a flicker of hope. It wasn't much, but it was enough to make me believe that maybe we still had a chance. The days after Sarah and I had our last conversation felt strangely quiet, like the calm before a storm. It wasn't that things were perfect now, but there was a tentative peace between us. We had both agreed to take it slow, to see if we could work through our differences, and for the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to believe that maybe things could be okay. But something was still eating at me. We had talked about the prenup, yes, and we had come to a mutual understanding. Well, at least we seemed to. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that our conversations had been surface level. We hadn't really talked about what the prenup represented for both of us. We hadn't really dug into the underlying issues, the doubts, the insecurities. I could feel the walls between us, and as much as we were trying to break them down, they were still there, looming over us. It wasn't until I got a call from her mom that I began to realize just how deep the cracks ran. "Robin," Her mom's voice crackled on the other end. "I need to talk to you." I felt a sinking feeling in my chest. What now? The last time we'd spoken, it hadn't gone well. Sarah's mom had always been kind to me, but lately, it seemed like she was more interested in telling me what I was doing wrong in Sarah's life. I didn't want to deal with this right now, but I didn't have much of a choice. "Sure, what's going on?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "I just don't understand why you're being so stubborn about this," she said, her voice tinged with frustration. "I know Sarah has her issues, but you can't just throw everything away over a piece of paper." I felt my jaw tighten. "It's not about a piece of paper," I said, my voice colder than I intended. "It's about protecting both of us." Protecting. "Robin, she's your fiancée. You're supposed to trust her. If you really loved her, you wouldn't need this." I was quiet for a moment, trying to hold on to my patience. "I do love her," I said, the words slipping out before I could stop them. "But love isn't enough to make sure we're both protected. I'm not just protecting my assets. I'm protecting us." "You're treating her like a business deal." Her mom shot back, her voice rising. "You're making her feel like she's not enough, like she's just some gold digger trying to get her hands on your money." That stung, but I couldn't let it shake me. I had to stand firm. "That's not what this is about," I said firmly. "It's about fairness, about making sure that we both have something to fall back on, no matter what happens." "I don't know what you expect her to do with this," her mom said, her voice softer now, almost pleading. "She's trying to do the right thing, Robin. You're just pushing her away." I didn't respond right away. I was so tired of hearing how I was the bad guy. So tired of being told that everything I was doing was wrong, that my need for security was somehow making me cold and distant. I couldn't make her see things the way I saw them. But I couldn't back down either. "Not this time. I'm not pushing her away," I said, my voice quieter now. "I'm just trying to make sure that we both have something solid to build on. I'm not the one who's been making comparisons to other people, making her feel like I'm not enough. This is about us, about building a future together. But I can't do it if I'm constantly worried that everything I've worked for will slip through my fingers." She was silent for a long time. I could hear the soft sound of her breathing, and I wondered if she was finally starting to understand, or if she was just frustrated with me for not seeing things her way. Finally, she spoke, her voice low. "I just want what's best for her, and I want what's best for you too. But I don't know if this is it." "I know," I said softly. "I know it's hard. But this is how I feel, and I'm not going to change that." After a long pause, her mom sighed. "I'll let you go, then," she said, almost resigned. "But Robin, please, think about her. She's been through a lot." I didn't know how to respond. I wasn't sure if she meant what she said or if she was just trying to guilt me into backing down. But I nodded anyway, even though she couldn't see me. "I'll think about it," I said, my voice quiet. "Thanks for calling." When I hung up, I sat there for a long time staring at my phone. A part of me felt guilty. Maybe I was too rigid. Maybe I wasn't being fair to Sarah, but the other part of me, the part that had been burned by my past mistakes, knew that I couldn't let go of this. Not now. Not when I had worked so hard to get where I was. The phone call had thrown me off. It had reminded me of just how much pressure Sarah and I were under. Not just from our families, but from each other. We were both holding on to things, expectations, fears that were pulling us in different directions. And I wasn't sure if we could overcome it. The next few days were more of the same. We spoke, but it felt like we were tiptoeing around the real issues. The prenup was still there, looming between us, and I could tell that Sarah was still struggling with it, still unsure of how she felt about it all. I had been trying to protect myself, but I was starting to realize that, in doing so, I might have been pushing her away even more. Maybe I hadn't been as understanding as I thought. Maybe I was so focused on the future that I had ignored the present. It was then that I realized maybe we weren't just fighting over money. Maybe we were fighting over control. The days after Sarah's mom's phone call felt like they were dragging on. We were still in this limbo, trying to figure out where we stood, but every time we spoke, it felt like we were getting further apart. The distance between us wasn't just physical, it was emotional. I didn't know how to bridge the gap, and I couldn't tell if Sarah was even willing to try anymore. I spent more time in my head than I ever had before, wondering if this was all just inevitable. Maybe Sarah and I weren't as compatible as we thought. Maybe this prenup was just a symbol of everything we couldn't reconcile. The different priorities, the misunderstandings, the need for control. She wanted stability, but I needed security, and it felt like there was no way to meet in the middle. One evening, Sarah texted me again. "We need to talk. I'm coming by." I had expected it. Honestly. The silence between us had stretched for days, and I knew that at some point, we'd have to face what we were both avoiding. My stomach twisted when I read the message. I wasn't sure if I wanted to see her again, not like this. But I couldn't avoid it anymore. I had to face whatever was coming. When she arrived, she didn't waste any time. She walked in, her face tired, her body language tense. There was no more warmth in her step. She wasn't rushing to embrace me like she used to. This time there was only a quiet, uncertain hesitation. She sat down on the couch across from me, folding her arms over her chest, and I couldn't help but notice how distant she seemed. She didn't meet my eyes. "I've been thinking," she began, her voice quieter than I'd ever heard it, "about everything about us. And about what you said last time." I nodded, my chest tightening. "Okay. I've been selfish, Robin," she said, finally looking at me. "I've been so focused on what I wanted, what I thought I deserved, that I haven't really listened to you, to what you need." I swallowed hard. Those words, selfish, deserve, hit harder than I expected. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't the resolution I thought I needed, but it was something. Something that made me realize maybe, just maybe, we still had a chance. "I was wrong to push you, to make you feel like you weren't enough," she continued, her voice breaking slightly. "I thought the things I wanted would make me happy, but I see now that it's more complicated than that." The weight of her words settled in. This wasn't a perfect apology, and it wasn't going to fix everything between us. But it was the first real acknowledgement that she understood where I was coming from, and that meant more than I had realized. "I've been so caught up in these ideas of what I thought we should be," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I don't want to lose you over this. I don't want to let a piece of paper decide our future." I couldn't speak right away. My throat was tight, and my mind was racing. This was the moment I had been waiting for, where she would either understand or walk away. This was where we would either move forward or end it. "Sarah, it's not just about the prenup," I said, my voice firm now. "It's about us, about being on the same page. I can't build a future with someone who doesn't understand why I'm doing this. It's not about control, it's about making sure we're both protected, no matter what." She nodded, but her eyes were distant. "I get that," she said quietly. "But I also need to know that you see me as more than just someone you have to protect." Her words hit me harder than I expected. I wasn't sure how to answer. I hadn't meant to make her feel like I didn't see her as a partner, as an equal. But I had been so focused on making sure I was secure that I hadn't considered how she felt in all of this. "I do see you," I said softly, my voice thick with emotion. "I see everything you've done, everything you've brought into this relationship. But I also need to protect what I've worked for. And I need to know you're willing to protect that too." We sat in silence for a long moment. The quiet between us was heavy, but it wasn't suffocating like before. It felt like we were finally in the same room, finally seeing each other, for better or worse. "I'm not perfect," she said after a long pause, her voice small, "and I know I've made mistakes. But I'm willing to try, Robin, if you'll give me that chance." I took a deep breath. Looking at her face, there were still so many doubts, so many questions about where we would go from here. But in that moment, I felt a shift, a small but significant change. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And it felt like a beginning. "I'll give you the chance," I said, my voice steady but my heart racing. "But we have to be honest with each other. No more pretending. We need to figure this out together." She nodded, her eyes brightening just a little. "I want that," she whispered. The weight between us wasn't gone, but it had shifted. We weren't at the end of our journey, but we had taken the first step in the right direction. I wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like we could face it together. She stood up, and we stood there for a moment, neither of us quite knowing how to end the conversation. But this time, the silence felt different. It felt like it wasn't the end. It felt like a new beginning. "I'll talk to the attorney tomorrow," I said quietly, still processing everything. We'll work it out. But we'll do it together. She smiled, a tentative smile. But a smile nonetheless, she echoed. And with that she walked out the door, leaving me standing there, uncertain but hopeful. For the first time in weeks, I felt like we might just make it through this. If we both tried, if we both put in the work, it wasn't going to be easy, but we had a chance. And that was all I needed for now.